Hi, I'm Krista.
And I'm Sarah.
And we have this podcast called Have We Talked About? Where two friends at different points in their lives chat about everything in their lives.
From current events to pop culture, from self-care to self-indulgence, and everything in between.
Join us weekly to see what we talk about next. Hey, friend.
Hey, another week.
Another week, another podcast. Are we ready?
We are ready. What are we chatting about today, Krista?
I believe, and I think a good topic that we should chat about today is family dynamics. So the overall structure of the family, birth order of the children, because another thing that makes us opposite is that I'm a middle child and you are an only child.
Yes.
Well, lucky you.
Is it lucky?
I mean, from my perspective, because middle children get ignored, and I suffer from middle child syndrome extremely. So,
yeah, I feel like there's so much to talk about in family dynamics, especially nowadays. Like, supporting your parents, being
right.
there for your grandparents, raising kids in today's day and age, supporting siblings, nieces, nephews, whatever it is. It's just there's a lot that goes into a family and being there for family. So we wanted to chat about it.
Absolutely. And I guess the importance of the structure and how it affects you, right? Like we all carry trauma from our upbringings and, for different reasons. Or not, depending on if you're lucky enough to escape the trauma. But as millennials, I don't think that you escape any trauma. If you are a latchkey kid and never been home alone and had to walk home at 7, you've been out in the streets. Yeah. you're cut from a different cloth. I do, as always, have some stats. And I figure I could start with the overall structure of the family and give some interesting stats on that before we dig into the actual birth order.
Let's hear it.
So again, these will be US based stats because they're a lot easier to pull than Canada, and obviously US is significantly bigger than Canada's population. Research suggests that the average family size in the United States has decreased over time, which I think we all were kind of aware of.
Yeah, makes sense.
In 1970, average family size was 3.14 people. That always
love it. Okay,
right?
so three kids.
Yeah, this is a little bit over 3 kids. And in 2020, it is 2.52 people.
Okay.
Right? 2.5.
Okay.
So, which also changes the structure of the family because then there's no, I come from a family of 3. So there is no third child there. So there's only an oldest and a youngest in terms of a dynamic, which is interesting.
Right.
Other things in terms of more psychological effects of families. Studies have shown that children who grow up in large families, defined as families with 4 or more children, may experience more social, emotional, and behavioral difficulties compared to children in smaller families.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's super interesting.
Especially the social part.
You would think it was the opposite because you were basically ingrained and indoctrinated to just huge family sizes. But then maybe that speaks to the lack of attention that you get as being one of many.
Right.
In the same way that maybe teachers in elementary schools complain about having class sizes that are too large, right? The one-on-one attention then decreases.
Because I feel like your stat said, my parents, my in-laws, my aunts and uncle, whatever, they had large families. I know older people that come from large families, and that makes sense. Absolutely. But nowadays, that totally makes sense. You might have a sibling or 2 and that's it. Because stuff is expensive.
Well, of course. I mean, even as being one of 3, I didn't think about it as a kid, obviously, because I'm not thinking about it. But when you get older, you're 3 kids is a lot of kids.
Yeah.
2 is a max. If I could take it a step back to give perspective in terms of family dynamics, my dad is one of 3 and he's the oldest, and my mom is an only child.
Oh, so did she want a big family because of that?
She said she always wanted kids, but given her interaction with us growing up, you wouldn't think that way necessarily because she still maintained her only child mentality, I guess, or just the socialization of that. She needed to be alone a lot of the time and have her own space, but she had 3 kids. So
there's no alone time unless you lock yourself in your bathroom.
Right, exactly. And she wouldn't understand when me and my siblings would fight because she had no concept of sibling rivalry or
Valid.
like, dispute resolution, whereas my dad did. But my dad was out and about bringing home the bacon.
Yeah. Right. And you're a middle child, and you have an older brother and a younger sister?
Correct. So I'm not an only female, but I'm the oldest female. So my sister is the youngest, and she's a female. So she's considered the baby of the family, but not only in my circle. Like, I have a very small family, so even like within my first cousins, like, she's still the baby.
Right.
Even though she's more than grown. She has 3 kids.
She's a full-on adult, but still considered the baby of the family. Got it. Yep.
The slight difference in my dynamic is that there's almost a decade between my brother and I. So even though I'm a middle child, I also have to take a role of like older sibling to my sister because we're close in age. So as a kid, I'd be responsible for her. We, like, we have to walk home together, like make sure she's okay. Don't let any bullies fuck with her at school. Like,
yeah.
So, yeah.
And did you like being the older sister?
No.
Like when you were a kid? Or
no.
now?
I'm still an anxious person, but the sense of responsibility I felt like I had over my sister was, to me, it felt completely overwhelming. Because, yeah. And talking to other people who have siblings, they're like, I don't feel that way. But I'm like, I would never in a million years, like, let somebody, like, hurt my sister, like, take a bullet for me. I mean, that's a real thing. But I'm like, yeah, like, I had a sense of responsibility over her that was probably more than the average person, just because I am an anxious person that way.
Got it.
What about your parents? So you're an only, but you're a product of, your mom was an only?
My mom was the oldest of, and there was 4 siblings there, and my dad's the oldest of 3. So they're both the oldest in their families. And then there's just me, only child. But I feel like my parents raised me not to be the stereotypical only child person. You know how, like, people just automatically assume, oh my God, you were totally spoiled when you were younger. Yeah, but I don't think I was, like, overly spoiled in the sense, like, only child. People think only child are spoiled. I think my husband, who is the youngest, who has an older sister and who's the youngest, I think he got spoiled a lot more than me. Let's just say that.
Super interesting.
Yeah. So, but yeah, only child. I always wanted a sibling.
Aww.
Whether it was older or younger, I always wanted a sibling. But it wasn't in the cards. That's fine. But now having my own family, I knew I wanted my son to have a sibling.
Right. Because you have that sense of
that was very important to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It was very important to me. Like, I wanted him to have a younger brother, younger sister, somebody to always be there for him.
And you don't think about the impact of that in the sense, like, as you become older and they become older, they have each other. Like, I have my siblings now that my parents are getting older. Their health is, deteriorating. And as an only child, that could be a big burden to bear, right? Like, if that becomes a case where you're having to, like, take care of your elderly parent that's sick, and you don't think about it then, but it's like, you have a built-in team, siblings, you have built-in friends. There's all of these, like, upsides to it.
Exactly. And I see my parents and their siblings dealing with my grandparents because I'm very fortunate and have all of my grandparents are still alive, knock on wood, to this day, which is fantastic. But I see my aunts and uncles running in circles, like taking them to their appointments, doing this, doing that. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, there's only me.
Yeah.
So in Sarah's perfect ideal world, I need to move and get my parents to move a little bit closer to me, so I'm able to help them out and be there for them once they, get older. Yeah.
Interesting that you touched on grandparents. So I do have a stat related to grandparents that I do want to bring into the conversation. Studies have shown that children who have positive relationships with their grandparents tend to have better mental health and social competence compared to children who do not have such relationships.
Wow.
Isn't that so interesting?
Yeah, that is.
I wouldn't say...
Did you have a relationship with your grandparents?
Yes and no. I never had a real grandfather growing up. My father's father passed away when he was young. So I have a grandfather on that side. And then my mother's father, so my maternal grandfather, always lived overseas and was always on to the next thing. He lived in Australia for most of my life. But never, I think I saw him 2 or 3 times in my life. He wasn't a grandfatherly type, so we never connected. So I didn't have that bond. And then my mom's mother, we always tend to be closer to our maternal grandmothers because of the mother-daughter relationship. She lived in Scarborough for a big portion. So although she took care of me as a baby, came to live with us in my teens, I had a grandmother relationship, but it was a little bit, I don't want to say stilted, but it was a bit disjointed because she wasn't a big part of my growing up years. And then I wasn't really close with my dad's grandmother. I would see her all the time at family functions, but there wasn't that sense of affection. Like, you know, like when you see your parents or whatever, there was a bit of like distance. But of course, I love my grandmother, but I just didn't have the relationship that you see in movies.
Well, a movie is a movie, right? Yeah. It's not real life.
Or in the TikToks.
Right. That's valid. Yeah, I think I'm fortunate. I have pretty good relationships with all my grandparents. They are getting older, so it is tougher, but I do truly try to make an effort to go see them when I can, you know, take my kids to go see them, as, you know, that's their great grandkids. And that's important to me.
Totally.
For them to see them, maybe not remember them, but see them and, you know, make them smile. That warms my heart.
I mean, like all those generations of DNA, like that's like amazing. And then for your kids to have a bond with your great grandparents is like bonus.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to take a little derail, but still relate to families and family dynamics. Did you have family dinners as a kid?
Like just with your immediate family or
just
with
immediate.
Like...
I mean, if you guys got together every week as a bigger family, great, but more just immediate family.
Yeah, like me and my parents would have dinner together every single night.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Every single night. That was what we did. And I continue to do that with my husband and my kids too, because that's important. At the end of the day, we all sit down at the table. Whether my kids eat or not, that's a completely different story. But we all sit and we chat and they tell us about their day at daycare and we laugh. And that is 100% important to me. And usually my son and I will have breakfast together in the morning as well. And we sit down and we eat breakfast together. Yeah.
I do agree. That's like the time where you get together and you really can strengthen your bond as a family unit. I did not have family dinner with my parents every night. They work shifts, so that just wasn't a possibility. So be, you know, home alone kind of a lot of the time at night. But we always had family dinner and family breakfast on Sundays. So it'd be once a week.
That's nice. Yep. It's hard when, parents are on shifts or they're doing, you know, trying to bring in the money or whatever the case is, right? It's absolutely hard. I totally understand that.
Well, to validate your decision to maintain family dinners, to bring in another statistic to support your decision, family dinners have been linked to a range of positive outcomes for children, including better academic performance, better mental health, and lower rates of substance abuse.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I do know a handful of people that currently have young kids and they don't sit down and eat dinner together.
Same.
But those people were brought up having dinners with their parents every night, but what they're currently doing, they're not eating together. They're all home, but they're not eating together as a family.
Is that based on
fine.
Age? I find once you're a teenager, you start to kind of break
away.
No,
they have young kids, just like my son.
Well, to each their own at the end of the day. So
totally.
Not going to judge. Some kids may need to eat at 5 p.m. and maybe you're European and want to eat at 8 or 9. Like
Totally. Whatever works for your family, really.
Yeah, whatever works. Whatever keeps up the lines of communication, I think, is what's the most important. There's been a lot of talk, I think, in the last decade or even more about the concept of like what a family looks like now and using the term nuclear family or single parent family, because now there's all these other different identities, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I don't say that to be disrespectful in any way. But I'm going to bring some old school stats on,
let's hear it,
on these triggering terms, specific to nuclear and single parent families. In the United States, about 68% of families with children under 18 are nuclear families. Children that are in nuclear families are more likely to have parents who are married and have higher levels of education and income compared to children in other family types, which I guess is why a lot of people push for the idea of a nuclear family not losing its existence.
Right.
Because of the importance of it in terms of impact to the children. In terms of single parent families, 26% of families with children under the age of majority are headed by a single parent. And they are more likely to experience poverty and financial hardship. Obviously, that's implied in the sense that, you're raising children off of one income.
Absolutely. I give single parents so much credit and kudos to what they do on a day-to-day basis. Yeah. I don't know how you do it. You are literally, you're superheroes.
Yeah, it's not an easy feat to play the role of both a mother, father.
Absolutely not.
And even want to shout out the other aspect of families where grandparents or aunts and uncles have to step in and raise their grandchildren or their nieces or nephews too, because I still would count it as a nuclear dynamic if they're still like a maternal and a paternal figure. But it's another act of love to take in kids as your own.
Yeah. And I also feel like, I don't have a stat on this, so don't come at me. But I also feel like back in the day, people used to say, oh, it takes a village to to have a family, to raise a kid. Nowadays, where's that village at?
And that village is needed more than ever because life is so busy and things are so expensive. Like, the amount of money that you have to spend in daycare, where it's like, okay, in order to afford daycare, I need to work. But then, and when I'm working, I need to put my kids somewhere. It's just like, it's a never ending cycle. So having grandparents or other siblings to like step in, like if I have a kid at this point, which is slim, but if I do, I am going to abuse the shit out of my brother and sister in terms of like babysitting. Cause I'm like, it's your fucking turn. Cause I've changed way too many diapers.
Oh, you're a very nice sister. You have done a lot for your siblings and you're very, very generous. I also feel like things need to change in today's day and world because, a typical corporate job, if you have a corporate job, you're normally working 9 to 5 or 8 to 4.
Sure.
Okay. School is what time?
It definitely ends earlier than the workday.
Right. So what? No.
Right.
No. And or it starts at 9 or it starts at 8:30, but it's like, okay, but if I start work at 9 and I got to drop you off at 8:15, depending where you work, like how is that going to work? Like you need before care, you need after care. Like there's so much more involved. It's like things need to change to make it better for the kids and the parents.
Well, I will say in my day, they had a before school and after school program.
Yeah, they still do. They still
have that. But it's a cost. So then, like it's 100%. Not free, which just shows you like even when we thought things were perfect in a nuclear family working a 9 to 5, there were still challenges that people had to face. Where it's like my schedule does not line up with my child's schedule, and I do work longer than they go to school. So there is a breakdown there. And I have had to go into a before school program on a couple occasions as a kid because my mom had shift work and had to be there earlier than the school would be open, and had to convince the teachers to let me stay inside the house, in the classroom or wherever we were at the time, because it was still black outside. It was like 6:30 in the morning.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. I just feel like the corporate world, they just need to shift their hours a bit. Maybe do like a 6-hour work day, not an 8-hour work day to accommodate potential kids. And then, oh my God, guess what? You might have a few hours with your kids rather than running home, making dinner, getting into bed, doing everything, like just a thought.
Which is, I think, why post-pandemic people really have pushed to have remote jobs, because it allows that flexibility. I've worked a couple different companies where there's full transparency into somebody's calendar, and it says, I'll be at a doctor's appointment during this time. I'm dropping my kids off to school for this 45 minutes. I'm picking them up again. And you get more productive people because they feel like they can tell you exactly what's going on and account for their workday, but not have to like miss work or, make up reasons or having to end the day early without, any information. Like, why wouldn't that be something that companies push for? Because you do get more out of your employee that way. Where it's like, they trust me, so I trust them.
I agree. I also feel like with the move in technology and social media, grandparents, especially grandparents,
Yeah.
and even parents are just like losing, and even myself, honestly, too, are losing touch of everything because everything is happening so quickly. And then they always come to the younger generation being like, I need help to set up my blah, blah, blah. Right? Just technology is crazy what you can do now. My grandma has no idea. No idea.
Well, let's just be incredibly elitist here and just shout out all the millennials who have to figure it out for everybody, apparently.
Yeah.
Old and young. So,
Right.
like, it's still baffling that when you grow up in an environment or in an era where you had to be resilient and self-reliant, like, literally it's a generation of figure it out on your own. And then to have this new generation, which are the product of the millennials, where they're like, I don't want my child to have to go through what I went through. I don't want them to be home alone. I don't want them to do this.
Yeah.
I want to talk through a decision. We've overcorrected, and now these kids don't know how to figure out technology, even though that's all they know.
Yeah.
They don't know how to make decisions. There's a sense of entitlement of this person didn't teach me. They didn't show me. They didn't ask me. They didn't tell me. There's no like sense of like responsibility where like you won't be given the handbook to everything in your life. And also, people don't give a shit about you to do that.
Valid. Mm-hmm.
And I think that comes into like how different birth orders play out into the real world, right? Like how an older child, the oldest reacts to situations, how an only child, how a middle, and how a younger person have been able to like respond to this kind of change in the times.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you want to talk about or have any stats specific to your birth order, only children, only child.
Only child. I just have like personality traits, which I'm sure it's pretty people are fully aware. You know, only children tend to be spoiled, selfish, lacking social skills, which is interesting. Overly sensitive, and excessive attention from parents. That makes sense.
Interesting. I don't know if I actually agree with that in terms of how I've experienced only children.
No, and tell me what you think.
I think, and I'm going to speak in generalities, knowing that you're an only child and I don't necessarily sweep you with the same brushstroke. Because only children are only children, their immediate thoughts are always about self. How does this impact me? This is inconvenient to me. What do I get out of it? What's in it for me? So me is always like the leading thought process or leading direction. Because there's nobody else to consider. Exactly. I find the only children I knew are self-reliant in the sense that they know how to like be by themselves and entertain themselves and go out on their own.
We're pretty good at that.
Yeah. I wouldn't consider them codependent. Those are the biggest things I would say. And that's using my mom in the equation. She never wanted siblings, I don't think. And I think that's different than other only children, like you were saying, that you always wanted. I mean, I always wanted to be a twin, and I had 2 siblings.
Why did you want to be a twin?
Because then, you have a friend that's like the exact same age as you. But in my mind, I'm like, they're going to go through everything with you together, including like having a job. So in my mind, a perfect thing would be having a twin. We would have one job, and then we just take turns going to it.
That's funny. Until one day you get caught that you're not your twin.
Would never get caught. Would never get we live together. I mean, we would have to get our own jobs eventually because then we'd need our own relationships. So this is assuming that we're living together and breathing together as twins, right? Up until where we're like, okay, we need to have our own lives and husbands and stuff. And then we got to break away and do our own thing. But listen, I've gone away on vacation at work and come back with a whole ass tan. And people don't even notice that I'm a different color than when I left. And they'll be like, oh, so what'd you do on the weekend? I don't know, hung out in Mexico. So
that's so funny.
I could totally get away with a twin.
Maybe if there's twins out there, if any listeners that are twins?
Valid. I didn't include them in there.
How do you feel about being a twin? Do you like to be a twin? Tell me. I just want to know everything. I just find it so fascinating. Do you feel like you have a friend for life? So curious.
So interesting that we're talking about twins. In one of the older podcasts, when we talked about my dating life and like my last date and the guy that I talked about, who had had sex with 3 women in the last 24 hours was a twin.
Oh my God.
An identical twin. He showed me the picture of his identical twin brother. And he said, I know I'm a twin. He goes, but when I see other twins, I think it's the grossest, creepiest thing.
What?
He's like, it gives me the heebie-jeebies. And I'm like, I mean, for a lot of reasons, we know why, but that didn't work out. But even the fact that he himself is a twin and thinks it's like creepy, weird. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're detached from reality. But
I also feel like, and then I go back to like the mom or like the parents, like raising twins. Wow. You must be a literal superhero.
It's not easy. I've known a couple of twins in my time in the family, and like identifying them is challenging.
Yeah, valid.
Yeah, like that's breastfeeding at the same time.
That's everything.
Changing.
Like, do you sleep the first year? Probably not.
I wouldn't know how people do it. Well, I know in their family a single mom who raised twins.
Wow.
Yeah, not an easy feat, and it goes back to it takes a village.
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
I'm gonna jump to, I think the youngest child might be a new. What am I trying to say? Segue.
Okay.
I don't have anything to add about only children. Okay. Outside of what I already said. So if we can talk about younger children, in terms of the personality traits that I was able to find, is that they tend to be more outgoing and creative. And I guess they have that leeway to do it because they don't feel like they have to compete with their sibling because
exactly
they just exist and everything is golden.
Yeah.
So they tend to be more relaxed and easygoing. Shocking. But they do struggle with insecurity and inadequacy, because I think later in life, success becomes a bigger part of the equation, and then you feel, I think you start to feel the comparison to your siblings, and you feel like you have to kind of level up.
Valid. I can see that.
Yeah, I don't know outright any people in my friend group who are like the youngest child to know if that's true. I only know my sister, and she's not creative.
She's not creative.
Respectfully, she's not creative. But everything else is true. Like, she definitely is more easygoing and laid back, and as she's gotten older, felt the need to like compete with the siblings from like career perspective and stuff. And she's successful in her own right. But got it. Yeah. And I see her doing it with her own. She has 3 kids, and she definitely spoils the youngest one. The youngest one knows that he doesn't have to do anything.
Oh my god.
She literally calls him mama's baby. Like,
yeah.
So she'll be like, pick up your plate, and he'll be like, okay. And then he just smiles because he knows he's not going to do it.
Jeez. And then, so your middle nephew,
mm-hmm.
Do you feel like you have a good bond with him because you're both middle children?
Yes. We have a very strong bond because of the middle child. Because again, like you don't know where you stand, right? Like you have the responsibilities of an older child, but you don't have the experience of an older child. So you're kind of put in the middle to be responsible, but at the same time, you still don't know enough.
Yeah.
So, you don't feel as prepared. And so you're kind of just straddling the fence all the time, trying to stick out in some way. Like, I would say I respectfully am the smartest of my siblings.
Oh, jeez.
Academically, like from an IQ perspective, we're all smart in our own ways, and
yeah.
My siblings would agree. But
let's ask them.
But as a result, got the least attention when it came to like activities and schooling and stuff because I was self-sufficient. So it's like the only thing that made me stand out with my grades because nobody was paying attention to me otherwise. Like I wasn't going through any first license, first car, first girlfriend, to like needing support there. And I'm not the baby where it's like, oh, well, don't leave the baby outside and the baby. And I'm like, she's 20 years old. Like, guys, come on. She's okay.
Yeah.
So you're always trying to like, get acknowledged. So I think I don't see this here, but I would say my experience is that you feel like you have to be an overachiever to be noticed in the family as a middle child.
Mm-hmm.
They say that middle children tend to have more successful relationships and social skills compared to their siblings. I would disagree. I'm the most introverted of the 3 of us.
Yeah, yeah, I don't know if I agree with that too. I'm just thinking of all the middle children I know that doesn't align with their personality.
Yeah, they tend to be more shy and introverted. Even my nephew is the same, where it's like we're more like observers than participators. So we can be social, but we're not probably making the first move.
Got it.
But can be leaders if we absolutely need to be, but we'd rather not if we can avoid it.
If we have to be. Okay, and then what about the oldest? What does it say about the oldest?
The oldest children are more likely to pursue leadership roles and have higher rates of achievement in their careers. And they tend to have higher IQ scores and educational achievements compared to their younger siblings. That's interesting. I wouldn't say that to be true. Not that it's false, but I would say that, I mean, as someone who has the highest IQ in the family, that's false.
In your family, yeah.
In my family, but even if I compare like my cousins or something, I think we're all at the equal, like in terms of like oldest sibling, youngest, oldest middle, same level of like career success, probably. What they don't mention here is that the oldest of the family get a lot of the brunt of responsibility, though.
Yeah.
They usually have to play a parental role, especially as millennials growing up, where your parents weren't around and you were by yourself a lot. Like, my brother babysat us from a young age. Like, even though the gap was huge, but it's like he had that responsibility. So they do have a tendency to be those. What I don't think they acknowledge here is that oldest siblings tend to be the person that you go to in a crisis. Sarah, because they are used to managing emergencies and all that kind of stuff. And when I think of the same person who's like from a family of 6, I see him in that same way. Like when there's a crisis or when you like need support in like an emergency in the clutch, that person is going to stay calm and be able to like execute.
Got it. Fascinating.
Right? Is there any other interesting details I can pull out?
I think that's a lot. I have a stat too. It says 66% of U.S. parents say that raising kids is more difficult now than it was 2 decades ago. Which goes exactly with what we've been saying. It's harder nowadays.
I agree, but at the same time, who are we to say to actually know that to be true? Is it just because parents before just figured that we'd be able to figure it out? Because it's a different dynamic. Like kids were left alone, walk home from school alone, play in the front yard alone, left to the park alone. I know, but
kids don't do that nowadays.
Right. So then is that because it's harder to raise kids now, or because the latchkey kids had the kids now and want to protect them? This is the whole helicopter parenting.
Maybe, but also I think work is more demanding nowadays. Technology, you have to sometimes potentially bring your work home, which then, bleeds into your family life. I think social media, you always want to be the picture perfect family, doesn't help either. I think there's a lot of factors that go into that. Yeah, you're right. I mean, like I'm taking it from like this one perspective where it's like we've moved significantly from a generation where there was a start and stop to work. And there was a lot more leniency in terms of being able to provide for your kids and stuff. Now, people in the white collar industry, the blue collar industry are working more hours overall with absolutely no give from the employer. So as a result, it makes it challenging and creates a bigger distance in terms of like kids and what they can achieve based on kind of like the family dynamic they're growing up in. Exactly. So fair. Exactly. I know I think there are some TLC shows. I think one of them was like 19 Kids and Counting, which isn't on the air anymore. But I'm just like... Because the oldest is a pedophile. Yes. Precisely. But it's just like, I know they're religious and everything. We won't get into it. But like, my goodness, that's a lot of kids. The kids are just raising the kids at that point. Well, and that's the expectation. And also, let's talk about the mom of that family. There's no way that she doesn't have a prolapsed uterus or bladder. There's no way that all of her organs are inside her. Like, there's no way. Valid. Those are all like practically like home births as far as I'm concerned. She see the sneeze and they come right out. Like she's like, oh, give me a second. I got to put back in my intestines and my spine, which they don't talk about as a part of the birthing. But that's another series. Yeah, coming up. Oddly enough, I used to love that show, 19 Kids and Counting, or the Duggars, or whatever iteration of the show. And my mom be like, I don't know why you watch that show. She's like, my mom was always like, something's not right about that family. So my mom is very intuitive. I'm like, Mom, why are you always hating on everything? She's like, no. She's like, they're too happy. They're too this. There's something wrong. Well, don't you know that my mom was right? And then it comes out that the oldest molested like 4 of the sisters. Yeah. Parents said, you know what will help you heal, son? Jesus. Yeah. So go talk to this pastor. Yeah. Don't touch your sister's vaginas again. Yeah. And he's like, okay, bet. I'm going to go marry somebody. And now I'm just going to go on a Ashley Madison cheating website. And also I'm going to stockpile child pornography. Yeah. Problem solved. He also has like 6 kids too. So it's like, oh God. I know. But, I know. And there's a lot of other things. Like And we're not gonna get into it, but there's like all the religion associated with it too. And now the older kids are speaking about it. You know,
And
they
leaving
get
it.
questions. And they get questions on their social media like, "Oh, I see that you wear pants now. Is that your decision?" Because they didn't wear pants, whatever. So yeah, it was a good show when it was on, 10 years ago. But then lots of stuff came out, and everyone's like, "Ooh."
Nothing is as it seems. And I want to clarify that it was their own take on a religion. I think that the Mormon was the foundation, but they did like a remix or a re-up on it based on what Jim Bob decided was best for the family.
Right.
Also, right. unless there's Jim Bob as a name of like your sausage, why are we trusting people named Jim Bob?
Couldn't tell you. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't have
yes. 19, no, God. Do I want more kids? 100%. But in today's day and world, everything's expensive. People can't afford it. But I think a lot of people would want more kids, but we just can't because time and money is not
valid.
There.
Time and money. And the price of like giving your child like a good education to have like a good start in their adult life even.
Yep, 100%.
Tuition?
100%.
What? I can't even, like, Canada is peanuts compared to what the U.S. has to spend. Like, maybe tuition is 10 grand, maybe on a higher end here.
Yeah, I think it is per year, maybe, or more.
Yeah.
For sure. And, you don't have to help your kids with, saving for that. But my husband and I chose to, put some money aside and on a monthly basis to help them for their future because as they grow up, things are going to get even more expensive.
Yeah, well, that's the problem. I do want to recognize the fact that higher education, while it's still important, the idea of a university degree or university college degree, if we're talking from a U.S. perspective, isn't as important, at least in Canada, than it used to be, where a lot of the college programs have, kind of they've like bridged to university programs so you can get like your associates and then get your full bachelor undergrad. Yeah. But also if you're self-taught, there's a really drive for entrepreneurial spirit and things of that sort where if you have experience, then that is more important than sometimes a degree. If you can show that you've done the work. When was the last time they've checked my bachelor's? Other than my first job out of school, they're not checking for it. Granted, I'm not saying education isn't important. So if you're not self-educating, then you definitely need to go to an institution to get something because you need critical thinking. You need to learn how to work with other people because adulthood is one big group project.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think what you're touching on speaks to a broader issue is that there needs to probably be a consideration for more time off dedicated to like the care of your parents.
Right.
Not everybody in the workforce is a 20-something-year-old who can work 12 hours a day, get a hangover, come to work the next day, and have no responsibility.
Right. Valid.
So,
exactly.
Maybe from our mouths to God's ears to like the manifestation of like different policies. Hopefully that can change, and all of us in different birth orders can be treated equal. From birth, there's already discrimination happening depending on when we were born. But I will always fight for the middle children. So all of you middle children out there, I feel you, I hear you, and I support you. Is there anything else, Sarah, that you wanted to add?
I don't think so. I think just family dynamics are just
tricky.
Are a thing nowadays, especially when holidays pop up.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I just avoid them.
So much drama, so much stress, so much chaos that happens as well. It's a little crazy.
It definitely can be. But I think with these tips and tricks, it can help you like navigate that space. No, I'm kidding. You know how you get through family parties and stuff? You don't go, or you just have some alcohol. And those are the two tips and tricks I stand by. But I'm also super blunt and real with all my family members. So I don't end up talking to most of them at these parties because they don't like that.
Jeez. What not to do by Krista.
I just live and die by the sword, and that's the hill I'm going to die on. It's like, nobody ever has to wonder where they stand with me. And, I'm completely okay with that. I love all of my family, but I also am not spending my downtime enduring bullshit.
Valid. That's valid.
I want to protect my peace.
Yeah, no, valid. I think we covered a lot about families and family dynamics and everything that goes into that. Do you have anything else to add?
No, like you said, we've covered the gamut. We've come from two different perspectives. We understand that our perspectives are shaping how we're creating our own families going forward. And as always, love to hear the listeners' comments and feedback and chime in based on their birth order, based on their experience, based on their thoughts.
Yeah, what birth order are you? And do you agree with the characteristics and personalities that we have both mentioned for all of them?
Yeah, and has that impacted how you've then created your own family? Again, please rate and review us as well. We love seeing that. And we will see everybody next week. Miss Sarah, you and I will get back together again.
Until next time, chat with you next week.
Bye, girl.
Bye.